for the benefit of members of the public and anyone watching online. On my right is Anne Biggs, the Assistant Director of Planning. To her right is Steve Ashdown, the Head of Development Management, who will be making the presentations today. Just around the corner from him is Stephen G from West Sussex County Council Highways Departments. And to his right is Mark McLaughlin, Section 106 officer, who has come to observe today, and in the unlikely event we have any questions, he will hopefully be able to answer them. On my left is Councillor Swetman, my Vice Chairman, and on his left is Solomon Agutu, our legal advisor today. In the corners behind me are members of Democratic Services, who will be controlling the technology and taking the minutes of today's meeting. And then in front of me around the table are the members of the committee who will be making the decisions this afternoon. So moved on to the agenda. Item 1, to note substitutes in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 4. There are none. We have a full house today, so we have no apologies for absence. To receive declaration of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. If members have any interest to declare, can they please push the mic in front of them? Right, I see none. Item 4, to consider any items that the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. So we now move on to the substantive part of the agenda. Item 5, item recommended for approval, DM 232866, Land of East and Stowaway, Cookfield Bypass, Cookfield, West Sussex. And I'll ask Steve Ashdown to make the presentation to us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just start by drawing members' attention to the update sheet that was circulated to them earlier. Just running through the main headlines there, you see we've had some additional letters of representation, the additional points set out there. Importantly, we've had the comments in from the West Sussex Lead Local Flood Authority. They're not raising an objection to the proposal, and their suggested conditions are set out and informatively set out at the back of the update sheet. So that's conditions 30, 31 and 32. I'd also draw your attention to the points of clarification which we set out on the update sheet, particularly around the paragraph 189 of the MPPFs, particularly in terms of the officer report. That's para 12.22 and the additional wording that we've put there. So for members' benefit and the benefit of everybody at home, in terms of para 12.22, we say, while the site is located within the setting of the High Weald Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, also known as National Landscapes, it is not located within it. Given this, and having consideration of the assessment of the impact the proposed event would have on the setting of the High Weald AONB National Landscape set out in subsequent paragraphs 12.85 to 12.105 of your report, and that harm clarified as moderate by your planning officer, it's not considered that there is a strong reason for refusal. As such, it's not considered that para 1D small 1 is engaged, therefore para 11D small 2 is considered relevant in the determination of this application. So in short, as set out in the report, officers believe that the tilted balance in para 11D2 is engaged because we don't consider that the application is contrary to para 189 of the MPPF in terms of the degree of harm to the setting of the national landscape. And then just further down, we also clarified that harm in terms of para 12.105, the harm that the officers think is caused to the setting of the national landscape, which we consider to be moderate. The other point to note there as well is in terms of para 12.383, in terms of Section 106 agreement, there's an additional requirement there to be secured to the benefit of Mid Sussex in relation to the funding of a dedicated communities development officer, should the application be approved. And then the final thing in terms of the conditions, just some additional wording to go into condition 2 in relation to the parameter plans and securing the parameter plans and making it clear that those plans and parameters within them should not exceed those set out in the environmental statement which supports the application. So in terms of the presentation itself, the application site is shown here outlined in red. It covers approximately 100 hectares of arable land to the east of Anstey, so Anstey village is located here. The A272 runs along both the northern boundary, also known as the Cookville bypass here, and along the western boundary as well. And then you have the B2306, which runs along the southeastern part of the site. A couple of residential buildings located in the middle of the site. I'll show you in the next slide that they're both listed buildings, but they do not form part of the application site. And also to note here, this is the wastewater treatment works here on to the northeast of the site. So in terms of constraints, again, hopefully members can just about make out the red line of the application site here. So you have the High Weald National Landscape to the west of the site. The boundary is on the western side of the A272. So the A272 is here. The application site is to the east. The National Landscape is to the west. There are a number of pockets of ancient woodland within and adjacent to the site. So these are located here, 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 and here within the site. And then you have these other ones which are just outside the actual application site. And the purple lines through the site here and here are existing public rights of way. And there's also a public right of way which comes along Copyhold Lane here and which just crosses the site here before heading down to the south. So the application is in outline form and seeks consent for 1,450 dwellings, including 30% affordable housing, up to 90 residential care units, primary school, land for an SEND school, a health hub, local centre, including retail, community and employment uses, a sports and recreation facilities, public open space, allotments and associated infrastructure. All matters are reserved except for access. So it's just the principle of development for as described in the description just given, and the access which are for consideration today. A set of parameter plans have been submitted with the application, and for the reasons set out in the report, officers are not proposing that they are approved in their current form, as there are issues, for example, with the location of the school. However, they are relevant to show how the development is generally intended to come forward, and the next few slides just cover those parameter plans as currently submitted. So the first plan here on the left-hand side of the screen is the access and movement plan. You can see where there's three main accesses to the site, one to the north, one to the west, and one to the south. Proposed that would be a main spine road through the site, linking all three accesses together. There would be need, due to the levels across the site, for two bridge structures, one here in the north and one here in the south, and also dotted along in strategic points along that spine road would be a series of mobility hubs. In terms of the plan on the right-hand side of the screen here, then this is the green infrastructure plan. So it shows the areas of retained woodland on the site, which is the dark green. The areas of light green would be the open space. It's also worth noting on here that in terms of the ancient woodland, appropriate 15-metre buffers are proposed to the ancient woodland within the site. Importantly here as well is that this green shaded area here is the proposed buffer to the national landscape. And as set out in the report, it's the officer's view that this could actually be extended more into this northeast corner here, hence why we're seeking not to approve this plan in its current form, but would look to secure a greater buffer in this area here. So moving on, left-hand side of the screen here is the land use plan. This colour here, which predominantly across the site, is the proposed residential parcels. This teal colour, should we call it, is the proposed location for the sports facility, which would include the outdoor pitches. As you see, that's adjacent to the wastewater works. The yellow site here is the school site, which again is set out in the report. The Education Authority have some concerns within in its current location. And the purple above that is the proposed local centre location. And this area in here would be potentially where the residential care units in terms of the C2 use would be located. Then moving over to the plan on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, that deals with proposed building heights. So the two shades of yellow are predominantly across the site and predominantly 2.5 stories in height. Obviously, the darker the colour, the higher the building. There are elements here on to the south of the main public right-of-way which crosses the site, which members saw on their site visit on Monday. So to the south of that is where potentially the higher buildings would go in terms of 3 and potentially 4-storey buildings. Again, 4-storey being the darker colour. And around the local centre, potentially there could be 3-storey buildings as shown on this plan. And finally, in terms of the parameter plans, this is the sort of density plan. Again, the darker the colour, the higher the density. So predominantly across the site, you're talking in the region of, in terms of these lighter colours, 32 to 35 dwellings per hectare, going up towards 40 to 45 in this area here to the south of the main footpath that crosses the site, and in the local centre potentially up to 50 dwellings per hectare. But obviously all of that would be subject to consideration at a reserved matter consent in terms of layout, scale, etc., to make sure that what was proposed in terms of the overall densities was acceptable. So just turning very quickly to the 3 access points. This is the northern access to the Cuckfield bypass, be via a new roundabout. Couple of things to note, and I have another plan in a moment in terms of a proposed shared 3-metre wide cycle link, which will go all the way through to Hayward Heath. So that's on the southern side of the A272 here, and you also propose pedestrian link across in this northeastern corner, which will then link into the existing footpath network, which then leads up towards Cuckfield. In terms of the western access, again similar in terms of served by a roundabout. And you can see in terms of the approaches to that roundabout, both from along the A272 from the north and south, that there's a sort of a two-lane filter to that roundabout. And then finally, in terms of the southern access, again served by a roundabout, and again there'd be a footpath leading from the access, which would then tie into the existing footpath which starts or stops, currently stops around here. As briefly mentioned, that there is a proposed cycle route along the A272 to Hayward Heath. So that would consist of a new shared path along the entirety of the Cookfield bypass to the roundabout to the east, and then there'd be various improvements along that route all the way through to the two roundabouts at the top of the road there by Muster Green to allow that cycle route all the way through into Hayward Heath. This is just an indicative long section through the site based on those parameter plans that were submitted. So on the right-hand side of the screen, that's the southern end of the site. You can see how that's in this area here. The line of this cross-section goes through the site and ends on the right-hand side of the screen, Cookfield. You can see how the site undulates. So from the Cookfield end, obviously it slopes down into the valley, which is located here, before then rising up again to reach the ridge. That is that footpath that we walked along on Monday, before then dropping down again and then rising up again to the southern end of the site. To support the application, there's also a concept master plan just to show how it all could link together and bring a bit of life to those parameter plans. So western access here, school located here around the local centre, as well as the C2 residential use. Old Place, which is located in the centre of the site, so one of the two listed buildings that are located here. That would have public open space to the south. Then turning to the northern access here, the sports facility, pitches, adjacent to the waterworks here. Again, crossing through this belt of woodland here. Mackerel Farm Cottage, which is located just off the site, again is another listed building. You also have a further listed building located here. And then, as I said, then you've got the residential parcels to the south of the main pedestrian footpath through the site, which then comes down towards the southern access here. Briefly, just a few photos. This is looking at the northern end of the site. Here's the existing waste treatment works here. This is that northern parcel where the sports facility would be. This is looking west across that field. So behind this tree line here is the 272. And this is further down within that parcel, and this is where the site dips down, and this is where the bridge structure would need to go across in order to head up towards the middle part of the site. Again, this is a couple of photos from the middle part of the site. So this is the field which is directly to the south. To the north of when you look towards Cookfield from that footpath through the middle of the site, and this is looking back up towards it, and you can just make out Old Place in this part of the photo here, and then this is looking out westwards towards where the access to the site would be. Some photos from that public right-of-way and the access road which runs along that line, and obviously this is looking northwards towards Cookfield, which is over here, and this is towards Cookfield here, and the church is located in this view here. And finally, just some photos of the southern end of the site, and you can just see from there in terms of the undulations, changes in levels which lie across the site in this location. And then just quickly is the just an aerial shot of the site. So the site falls in here. You can see the public right-of-way which comes along here, various parts of woodland, and you can see how it's made up of the current arable fields. So obviously members have a comprehensive report in front of them outlining all the relevant issues. The report sets out why the proposal complies with a number of the development plan policies. It's a major housing development on an unallocated site within the countryside, and therefore conflicts with the development plan we've read as a whole. Regard needs to be given to whether there are any other material considerations that indicate decisions should be made otherwise than in accordance with that development plan. The NPPF is a material consideration, and para 11 is of particular relevance. As the council are unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, it follows that the policies most important for determining this application are out of date, and that's via footnote 8 of para 11 of the NPPF. As set out in the report and clarified in the update sheet, your officers consider that the proposal complies with para 189 of the NPPF, which relates to development in and within the setting of national landscapes, and as such there is no strong reason for refusal. As such, the tilted balance in para 11D2 is considered to apply in this instance, and planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the NPPF taken as a whole, having particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable homes individually or in combination. The report sets out a number of benefits derived from the proposal and the weight that officers consider should be placed upon them. And these include the provision of the new housing, including affordable housing, and other specialist housing. It does include, say, the C2, and there's also some self-build plots, and we officers consider that to be of a substantial benefit. Provision of a primary school and land for an SEND school, again, officers consider this to be a significant benefit. Provision of on-site sports facility and pitches, again, a significant benefit. Provision of a local centre, including health hub and other social facilities, including allotments, again, a significant benefit. Improved public transport provision for additional local bus services, again, a significant benefit. Economic benefits which do include increased spending in the area from future residents, a significant benefit, and also an overall gain in biodiversity. In respect of identified adverse impacts, officers have identified the following: impact on the landscape and visual character of the area, significant. Impact on the separate identity of Anstey and Cookfield, significant. The less than substantial harm to the designated assets, significant. Impact on the setting of the Highwood National Landscape, moderate. Impact on trees, limited. And the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, limited. Your officers consider that the adverse impacts of granting permission would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and while the proposal does not comply with the development plan, there are material planning considerations of sufficient weight that would justify approval of the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Right, so we now move on to the public speakers. Just to advise speakers that they have a maximum of 3 minutes. I will try and indicate when there is 1 minute left, and after 3 minutes, if you're still speaking, I would ask you to wrap up in 1 sentence, please. Right, the first speaker is Councillor Simon Stokes of Anstey and Staplefield. He has a temporary war wound, I gather, so...
That is correct, Chairman.
So he will be speaking from his seat at the back there.
I hope that's okay for everyone.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
Thank you. Chairman, councillors, you will by now be aware of the legal opinion from Landmark Chambers that states that the multiple harms that this proposed development would do to the setting of the high-wheeled national landscape is sufficient by itself to switch off the tilted balance upon which this application relies. This opinion helps inform our submissions to you today. Our parish council understand that you must make planning decisions within the NPPF with guidance from central government. That guidance says that we should operate in a plan-led system, the purpose of which is to leave a legacy of sustainable development. You, as a local planning authority, have a duty to identify appropriate locations for sustainable development, to allocate them in a plan and then to work with developers, infrastructure providers and existing communities to get them delivered. And we fully support that approach. When plans go out of date or government policy changes, then speculative development can become the norm. Even so, speculative development proposals are rarely this large and rarely this consequential. They don't usually threaten to redefine a whole landscape of national and European importance forever. The emerging local plan identified several locations as suitable for large-scale growth, designed to meet the district's housing needs for years to come. Wouldn't it have been a better strategy for the council to promote these sites for development rather than bet the farm, so to speak, on this one unsustainable site? This site was not included in the emerging plan. You rejected it as unsuitable. The site selection report highlighted that due to its location, opportunities for sustainable transport mitigation are unlikely to be effective. There were good reasons for these judgments, and they haven't changed. The report before you evaluates the application against development plan policies and material considerations. Now, we don't agree with everything it says or all of the judgment it makes. My colleagues will explain why the proposal is in fact considerably worse than your officers suggest. But we do agree on this one critical point. If the tilted balance wasn't applied, this application would have been recommended for refusal. As stated in the report, quote, the proposed development does not accord with the development plan when read as a whole. It conflicts with all of the plan's most important policies. It does not constitute sustainable development. It is only recommended for approval because officers believe you have no other reasonable option. We take a different view, and more importantly, so can you. To make your decision, know these three things. Legal opinion given is already sufficient to disengage the application of the tilted balance. There is clear precedent for this provided by the Monkhill Planning Appeal. Even if this was not the case, the NPPF states that development can only proceed at sites which are, quote, are or can be made sustainable. This site isn't and it can't. Lastly, it is hard to see how a 5-year housing supply can be addressed by a site that is not shovel-ready and is unlikely to start before 2032. I will now hand over to my colleagues to expand further upon these points.
Thank you very much. Can members of the public gallery please refrain from making any noise or any speeches, please? The second speaker is Councillor Steve Oversby Powell from Cuckfield Parish Council. And again, your 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
Hello, councillors. Should the tilted balance apply? Well, we've just heard from your officer, haven't we? Now, the test, put simply, is whether there's a policy in the National Planning Policy Framework related to protected areas or assets, which include the national landscape, that represent a strong reason for the application to be refused. If there is, then as we've heard, the tilted balance is switched off, and your judgment today proceeds on the normal flat basis. Now, prior to today, your officers were telling you that there were no relevant policies. Now, they say there are, but it's only moderate and not severe. We're confident that's incorrect, and you may take a different view. The severe and irreversible impact of the high-wheeled national landscape is a very strong reason to refuse the application, and that's derived directly from paragraph 189, as we've heard. The high-wheeled national landscape unit has made a very strong objection to the proposal, which they have concluded would fail to conserve and enhance the landscape character and natural beauty of the high-wheeled. The high wheeled unit also considers the proposal would not be sensitively located to avoid or minimise those adverse impacts. Your landscape advisors agreed with this assessment of harm, but the report before you does not grasp its significance. That report wrongly implies that paragraph 189 can only be relevant if the proposed site sits wholly inside the national boundary. That was changed this morning, by the way, and they agreed that if it happens within the setting, then it can be considered too. Yeah? Now, we're of the opinion that this is severe, okay? And this policy isn't controversial or untested. My colleague here referred to the Monkhill development in the setting of Longdean House in Hazelmere. Waverley Borough Council rejected it, as did an inspector, and then that decision was upheld by the Court of Appeal. Why? The judgment ruled it was because of the damage, significant harm caused in the setting of the outstanding natural beauty area. Since then, there's been another one at Goring Gap, rejected on these same grounds. So contrary to what your report says, the harm to the protected national landscape, as assessed by expert and advisors, would be very considerable. And paragraph 189 gives a clear basis for concluding that this is therefore unacceptable. You may, and we believe you must, therefore conclude that there is a strong reason to refuse this application based on the adverse impact on the protected landscape. If you do, the tilted balance does not apply. And on that basis, as we will highlight, your officers have already set out clearly the reasons why you should refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, the third speaker is Giles King from the Cookfield Society, again speaking against the application. And again, the 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
Your report only tells you half a story and reads like a prospectus for the applicant. Many of the claimed benefits are either overstated or undeliverable. You deserve a rounded picture before you make your important decision. The report admits the development does not accord with the development plan, and yet claims that because your council lacks a 5-year housing supply, the NPPF requires that the tilted balance test is used to assess the housing need. But that is not how the NPPF works. At the heart of their framework is the requirement that new development be sustainably located, even when the tilted balance applies. The NPPF expressly says that development must be directed to sustainable locations. There's a whole big legal question as to whether the tilted balance that you are being asked to use applies in this case, and we've explained why it does not. Your report does not warn you that you may well be treading on slippery legal ground, denying you the opportunity to weigh up the pros and the cons of this project on a proper basis. The report does not invite you to consider the merits of the promised new housing in the context of your 5-year housing supply challenges. It does not mention that the planning approval conditions proposed mean that the first spade is not in the ground until 2032. This development will do nothing to address your housing supply shortfall and contribute nothing to help the current national housing shortage. Furthermore, the council has identified other more sustainable sites that would make up the housing supply shortage that Anstey Farm can't deliver for a decade. Nor does your report invite you to consider this application in the context of the facts that you have argued consistently in recent years that Anstey Farm site is not a sustainable site to allocate for development. For example, all of the off-site facilities are greater than 20 minutes walk, and the modal share for bus service is totally unrealistic. It was not included in the plan for good reason. It would create a car-dependent community with limited access to sustainable transport and have significant infrastructure constraints. Yes, the delivery of housing matters greatly, but that does not lead you to approving all new housing schemes opening the developer floodgates throughout the district. New development must be sustainably located. Anstey Farm is not. You are making the most significant decision in the history of the villages of Anstey and Cookfield. Take courage and please say no today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker against is Lionel Sharp. Sorry, I apologise, it's Michael Brown
Correct. From the,
from the CPRE.
thank you.
Yeah.
Chairman, just before I start, can I just raise a protocol question with you, please? We've had to produce and deliver to you what we wanted to say yesterday morning. This afternoon, we find that there is what is, in fact, a very significant amendment to the officer's report. And I would like to ask for an additional 60 seconds at the end of my 3 minutes, just to try and respond to that new and different point, if I may.
No, I'm sorry, I can't allow that.
Thank you.
The 3 minutes start when you start speaking.
Locational sustainability is fundamental to the planning system, and it's stated to be so within the NPPF. It does not depend on your district plan policies being up to date. With no parameter plan accompanying the application, apparently, you are flying completely blind as to what the development will end up looking like. You've been advised by your own experts that this is not a sound place for major development because of its almost total car dependency, that active travel measures will, on Fairfax's own admission, mitigate by no more than 5%. Because of the real harm that it will cause to the High Weald and its management plan objectives by virtue of its proximity. Harm that has to be given the greatest weight and avoided wherever possible to meet your statutory duty to seek to further the purposes for which the High Weald was designated. Your planning report, in its amended form, has offered no reason for dismissing the advice of your High Weald planning expert. And because of the serious harm to the local countryside and landscape, as advised by your own landscape consultants and conservation officers. Because of the coalescence between Anstey and Cookfield and the swamping of Anstey's small but proud community, for a number of other individual less significant reasons mentioned in the report. Has anyone told you that Worthing Borough Council recently refused permission for a large development that would have impacted on the setting of the South Downs National Park, despite having a housing supply shortfall? Or that Horsham District Council refused permission for a big housing scheme near Thacombe Village on the basis that new residents would be car dependent? In both cases, the planning appeal inspectors this year supported the council's refusal of planning permission. Note that Horsham has a worse housing supply position than Mid-Sussex, and the case did not have the further aggravating factor of proximity to a national landscape. Surely all the scheme's downsides, all going to the heart of the question of whether Anstey Farm is a sustainable place for major development, collectively and cumulatively, clearly conflict with your district plan, as the officer's report admits, and significantly outweigh the benefits that new housing in the wrong place would bring. You can say no and do so without fear. That is just applying the planning system in the way it is intended to work, to put new development in the right place. You have other options. Just say no to Anstey Farm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to respond, or do you want to hear all the speakers first, Steve?
Can hear all the speakers first, Chairman.
Yeah, okay, fine, thanks. Right, we now have the three speakers in favour. I believe David Hewson is going first. Again, the 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'm pleased to speak today in support of the Anstey Garden community proposals focusing on transport and highways matters. In 2022, the site made it to the penultimate stage of the local plan site selection after a vigorous assessment where everything was found to be satisfactory, apart from highways, where more information was required. However, there was simply not enough time at that point for us to complete the work before the Regulation 19 was published. Since then, the required modelling has been carried out and the scheme has been reviewed in detail by the statutory transportation consultees, National Highways, Active Travel England and West Sussex County Council. Each confirmed they deemed the proposals acceptable on highways grounds. The transport strategy for Anstey has been shaped through extensive engagement. It is fully compliant with both the National Planning Policy Framework, including paragraph 110, and local transport policy. The approach is designed to support sustainable development, promote active travel, and ensure safe and efficient movement across the network. A key part of this strategy is a comprehensive package of junction capacity improvements, including strategic points along the A272 corridor. These improvements are intended to ease congestion, improve safety, and accommodate future growth. The scheme also delivers multiple enhancements to strategic cycle links and pedestrian routes. This includes a new connection from the site directly to Haywards Heath railway station and town centre, plus integration with and enhancements to the wider network. These routes are designed to encourage walking and cycling, reduce car dependency and support healthier travel choices for all residents, not just those within the proposed scheme. In addition, the proposals include a new bus route to serve the development directly, supported by a legally binding subsidy commitment. The public transport strategy has been developed in close consultation with the local highways authority and local bus operators, with the aim of embedding sustainable travel habits and providing a genuine choice of transport modes. It will be supported through implementation of a travel plan and associated monitoring of travel behaviours during delivery. Taken together, these measures reflect a coordinated and deliverable strategy for sustainable transport. They address the need for connectivity, accessibility and inclusivity and are supported by planning conditions and Section 106 commitments to secure delivery and long-term benefit. To conclude, the ANSI scheme has been informed by legal advice. It meets national and local standards, delivers essential infrastructure and provides strong, sustainable connections for the future. It is acceptable on highways grounds and ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I think the next speaker is Stephen Brown from Wolf Pond Planning. The 3 minutes starts when you start speaking.
Well, good afternoon. I take great pride in speaking on behalf of the applicants in support of this well-conceived scheme for a high-quality, sustainable new community, which is accompanied by a fully funded package of supporting transport and community infrastructure. Your officer's report sets out a balanced assessment of the application, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for working closely with us over a 7-year period and for their conscientious approach to addressing each and every issue. This scheme proposes a sustainable community where people will want to live, work and recreate. It successfully balances environmental, social and economic needs, providing community infrastructure, biodiversity enhancements, alongside new homes and a network of public spaces, whilst minimising the impact of the proposal on the setting of the AONB. The tilted balance is unequivocally engaged. Your officers have correctly balanced the landscape impacts in the context of national guidance, paragraph 189 of the framework, and case law. The community infrastructure to be provided is fully funded by the applicant at no expense to the public purse. The education, health, commercial and leisure facilities will be constructed and then transferred to the ownership of the district and county councils. This is the first time a scheme of this nature, of this magnitude, will be delivered in Mid Sussex with fully funded benefits. As you know, and you've been told repeatedly, as is the national case, there's a demonstrable and ongoing need to deliver new homes and supporting infrastructure. This includes under the duty to cooperate through the local plan process. This application scheme is well placed to assist the council in meeting those targets. The site is deliverable. It will help also address the desperate need for affordable homes. So this is a collaborative, thoughtful, sustainable and well-conceived proposal from a local company with an unwavering commitment to secure a lasting legacy in what will be a sustainable environment for living. And members, Chair, the outline nature of this scheme enables this council to retain full control over subsequent application phases to create a high-quality living environment that will leave a positive legacy in this district. So Fairfax, as a local company, are indeed very proud of this scheme, and like your professional officers, we invite you to support this application today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Right, the last of the public speakers is Gary Oliver. Right, the 3 minutes starts when you start speaking.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, councillors, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Gary Oliver, and I speak as both a neighbour to this proposed development and as a resident of Cuckfield for the last 30 years. I wish to express my clear support for this application, adding my voice to the many others who are also in favour of this development. Over the past 3 decades, I've seen our area change, but what hasn't changed is the strength of our community and pride in where we live. We all know Mid Sussex faces real challenges: growing need for housing, a shortage of affordable homes for young people and families, and increasing pressure on local services. Saying no to everything simply isn't an option. What we need is the right kind of development, thoughtful, sustainable, and delivered by people we can trust. That's exactly what this application represents. It's not just houses in a field. It's a carefully planned community that brings genuine benefits. These include much needed housing with affordable homes so families aren't priced out, new schools, including provision for special education needs, which is in ever decreasing supply in this area, a health hub, sports facilities, green public spaces, and safe walking and cycling routes, landscaping and design that respects the character of our area. Because this is a single master planned community, these benefits can be delivered together, not piecemeal or not at all, as we often see on similar smaller schemes. Lastly, 3 short personal points. Firstly, all 4 of my children have grown up locally, and like many parents, I want them to be able to afford a home here in the place they love and call home. Secondly, I know Fairfax as a local company and have seen firsthand the quality of their developments, particularly at Perrymount Road in Haywards Heath, which has brought a real and positive transformation to that part of the community. And thirdly, we all need to be realistic here. Nobody wants development on their doorstep, myself included. But this land is always going to be developed. The real question is by whom? By approving this application here today, the benefit will stay under the complete control of this council and won't be left for a government inspector to decide, or worse still, another developer to come in and provide far less for our community. With Fairfax behind it, we have a trusted local firm, one committed to quality, community, and to delivering on their promises. So I urge you to support this application. It represents progress, balance, and a future we can be proud of. A community shaped with care for the benefit of everyone in Anstey, Cuckfield, and the wider district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, our final speaker is Councillor Jim Knight, the local ward councillor. And for the benefit of people that haven't been to our proceedings before, Councillor Knight is not restricted in terms of time, although we know from experience he's very reasonable, very succinct.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Firstly, I'd like to thank the speakers against this application from Cuckfield and Anstey Parish Councils, Cuckfield Society and their representatives, presenting strong and sound planning reasons to reject this application. They have devoted many hours on this application, representing the voice of the vast number of residents in Anstey and Cuckfield and Staplefield who are absolutely against this application, which will, if allowed to proceed, will change the very nature of our villages beyond recognition and forever. For Anstey, at a single stroke, this will increase the size of the village by some 950%, or in other words, approximately tenfold. Just think about that for a minute. Not to mention the coalescence with Cuckfield and the 4,000 houses already been planned as part of the Northern Arc just down the road. Clearly, this is an overdevelopment and out of character for our villages. Mr. Chairman, this is a speculative application. It is not in the district plan or in the emerging district plan. We as a council have not included this application, but have chosen many other more suitable sites. Importantly, this development will not help our 5-year land supply as a development. Spades in the ground will not commence probably until 2032. The recommendation is for approval based on tilted balance, as you've heard. If we were to approve this, it effectively means the floodgates are open for all developers, and our Mid-Sussex would be open to uncontrolled development. As I said at the previous hearing of this planning committee, this tilted balance seems extraordinary and worrying. How are we still here? We can't just acquiesce and be rolled over. However, I do recognise the district's housing challenges, but after careful analysis, I believe the application must be refused. The main reasons are as follows. First, the so-called tilted balance in national planning policy, which favours development when there is a housing shortfall, should not apply here. The High Weald National Landscape is a protected area, and expert advice, as we've heard from the High Weald unit, clearly identifies unavoidable long-term harm to this landscape if the development was to proceed. This alone is a strong legal and policy reason for refusal. Secondly, the proposed location is fundamentally unsustainable. Again, as we've heard, the site was not included in the emerging local plan for a good reason. It would create a car-dependent community with limited access to sustainable transport and would not contribute to the 5-year housing supply for many years due to infrastructure constraints. There are more suitable, as I've said, and sustainable sites already identified for the district. Thirdly, many of the claimed benefits are either overstated or undeliverable. The supposed biodiversity gains from the Beachy Bottom Parkland Reserve are not robustly evidenced and are challenged by leading experts. The economic benefits are limited, with significant long-term financial risks to the council, especially regarding the viability of bus services and ongoing leisure and ecological facilities. The inclusion of the SEND School is now in doubt due to objections to West Sussex County Council. can I just pause there a second,
Yeah, do it.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Fourth, the harms are significant and demonstrable. Permanent damage to the Highwood national landscape and its settings, loss of best and most versatile farm and mature trees, increased flood risk, depletion of national capital, harm to local heritage assets and coalescence of Anstey, Cookfield, eroding their distinctive identities. Water and sewage, I understand that we've not had a report from the Water Authority, and I just want to question the viability of not having a report from what is a strategic consultee, a very important consultee. I'd be interested to hear what the legal position is on that. In summary, these adverse impacts of these proposals far outweigh the benefits. Approving them would conflict with national and local planning policies on sustainable development, landscape and heritage protection, and would set a damaging precedent for our district. I therefore urge you to refuse these applications and instead focus on bringing forward more suitable deliverable sites to meet our housing needs. Let's protect this beautiful area of land for us, our children and our children's children. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Right, I'll invite Steve Ashdown to respond to any points on that the speakers have raised.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if I can just, again, I mentioned it in my presentation in reference to the update sheet, the issue around tilted balance and para 189. As set out in the report, para 12.90 sets out para 189, and the important part of that paragraph in relation to this application is the last sentence, which says, while development within this setting should be sensitively located and designed to avoid or minimise adverse impacts on the designated area, i.e. the national landscape. So it asks you to avoid or minimise adverse impacts. So again, as we set out, para 12.100, we say that recognises the possibility that there would be some adverse impacts arise. So it doesn't, that last paragraph, that last sentence does not envisage that there would be no impact. It says we need to avoid or minimise. That part of the report, and particularly para 12.104, then sets out, from an officer point of view, why we think that the harm has been minimised by the changes, including the removal of the Toucan crossing, the requirement for additional buffer along that western end. We identified as harm in the report, and we've clarified that in the update sheet in the language that we've used elsewhere in the report in terms of moderate harm. And we conclude in the report that we believe that that last sentence, that last part of para 189 is complied with. And in us making that judgment, that means that the tilted balance is engaged, because we believe 189 is complied with. So if you could comply with 189 and that last sentence, the tilted balance is engaged, and that is all in terms of the clarifications in the update sheet. It's just clarifying what is already in the committee report, but just making it front and centre for members and everybody else to see. The other thing I would say about the 5-year land supply, then, you know, we recognise that this isn't going to contribute immediately to the 5-year land supply in terms of the next 5 years. The 5 years supply is a rolling supply, so it moves on, and certainly in terms of the district plan review, currently examination, if we go back into examination, the likelihood is we could be asked to find more sites, more housing. And any applications that we approve, and including this would all go into that pot. So while it doesn't immediately help with the 5-year land supply between now and the next 5 years, A, it adds to the pot, but B, that 5-year is a rolling 5-year supply. So further down the stream, it comes on board. I think that's it for now, Chairman. Thank you.
Did you want to talk about, mention the water, the lack of response from South East Water?
They were consulted on the application, and they haven't responded. You know, ultimately, in terms of a supply, you know, from a legal point of view, that sits outside planning, and ultimately, you know, an agreement in terms of, I believe, under the Water Act, they probably have a requirement to supply water, but in terms of this application, they have not commented on it, Chairman.
Fine, thank you. I'll just clarify that position for right. Open the debate to members. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a ward councillor for Brookfield, Anstey and Staplefield, I'm well aware of the strength of feeling among the general public and the anxiety and angst that has caused. The district plan, the stalling of the Reg 19 district plan has caused this committee and indeed the officers great consternation over the past 6 months and left it in some difficult situations with difficult decisions to make. The basis of the stalling of the district plan has nothing to do with the contents of the district plan, which was judged, as far as I know, as being sound, but with the unmet need of the surrounding districts. So at the moment, that discussion is still ongoing, and so therefore the Reg 19 district plan shouldn't be discarded, nor should the fact that we've got an existing district plan in place, which it should be complied to. So we're in a difficult between and betwixt situation where this term, the tilted balance, comes into play because of the fact we can't demonstrate a 5-year housing and land supply. So all of this puts us as councillors and members and committee members into a rather difficult situation when judging these things. However, I still think that we need to base our judgment as a starting point on the district plan which is in existence and indeed the one which is going through the procedure. So on that basis, I just want to, referring to this particular application, just pick up on a few points which would seem to be at odds with the district plan. For instance, DP13 coalescence, which stops the development of extensions to villages or joining villages together, etc., etc. Now, this application is commonly known as Cookstye in the local environs, and it physically pretty much joins Cuckfield and Anstey into one conglomerate. So on that basis, surely that is in contravention of DP13. DP 34 and 35, listed buildings and other heritage assets. So the most, even though it's not within the confines of the proposal, Holy Trinity Church is widely visible on the hill from the site, and therefore viewed from everybody from that point. Now, instead of having a clear site, there's a clear strategic view of that area from the site, and therefore needs to be protected. And frankly, the scheme doesn't really do it. I mean, you look at areas 3, 12 and 4 on the map there, and that's blatantly in the way of the view, okay? DP 21, our old bugbear transport, okay? We know that a lot of work's been carried out on the A272 and Anstey Cross junctions to mitigate access in and out of the site. But on the basis there's 1,450 houses, that means essentially on a small estimate, 1,450 breadwinners and commuters. So the provision of 3 buses an hour to Haywards Heath and 1 bus an hour to Burgess Hill isn't going to cut it. And in reality, most of the people will commute either to Haywards Heath or to Burgess Hill to get the train to London or commute somewhere else. So, you know, putting that aside, it will essentially be a car-based proposal. DP12, enhancement of the countryside. Well, you know, protection enhancement is the title. And again, you know, I'm a keen walker and I walk through it all the time, as do lots of other people. And I don't see this as protecting or enhancing the countryside. DP6 settlement hierarchy, similar to coalescence actually, in that the site of Anstey will be increased by a factor of close to 10 by this. Is that settlement hierarchy? I'm not so sure. And the last one I'm going to flag is DP16, the High Weald Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, or the High Weald National Landscape, as it's now called. Now, accept that the site isn't in High Weald National Landscape, but it conjoins it. It's right next to it. So therefore, it does have an influence on that and can be viewed from it, and the High Weald National Landscape viewed from it. So it's like saying, you know, we had a waste reclamation centre on the edge of the Sussex Downs Way, that wouldn't have any impact. You know, it is, because you can see one from the other and it cuts both ways. So 6 points at least that I think are worth discussing. And there's a letter from the High Weald Joint Advisory Committee here, which states, the proposed development, by virtue of its very large scale and its proximity to the High Weald National Landscape, would result in a significant and discernible extension of built development into the surrounding countryside, creating a large new urbanisation adjacent to and abutting the High Weald National Landscape, and induce abrupt change of landscape character in close proximity to the HWNL, and a loss of natural landscape contiguous with it. Further, it would adversely impact on perceptual qualities of the HWNL, of the tranquility and rurality, due to the level of noise, activity and lighting that would inevitably be associated with the development of such a scale. So that's really a short selection of issues, but, you know, if we've supported allocated sites in this room here, and this frankly isn't an allocated site, so, and on that basis, can we support this on the whole basis of tilted balance alone? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Avery. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully appreciate the concerns of the local residents and the members of Cuckfield and Anstey Parish Council. After all, I am the ward member for Hurstpere Point, and under the future proposals, there are 3,000 houses in Sayers Common and 1,800 houses north of Hurstpere Point, and most of the points objecting to this application can be applied to those particular sites. I visited the site on Monday and walked along the central sort of footpath. It's really quite a nice rural ambience in that sort of area. And when we came halfway along and looked towards the Cuckfield, the spire of Cuckfield Church, we saw the valley on the other side with a really good landscape setting. I will query, and Councillor Avery mentioned this, DP12, under the existing district plan, there is a requirement for not building in the countryside and protecting of the countryside which maintains or enhances its quality. In paragraph 1223 of the report, the landscape consultant states that there will be significant adverse effects on the site and its setting. And in 1284, the planning officer agrees with landscape consultant on the impact of land character. So my question is to the planning officer, what weight do we give to the landscape issues in the planning balance?
Thank you. Do you want to take that now?
Yeah, so within, I think if I can go back with Councillor Avery, in terms of just about all of those policies that have been referenced, apart from DP21, then the report acknowledges that this development is contrary to those policies in the development plan. That's then where the NPPF comes into play, because those important policies like DP12, because we don't have a 5-year land supply, are out of date. So you have to give that policy less weight in that scenario. So then when you look at the next stage of what you need to do in terms of applying para 11, whether it's 11D1 or 11D2, 11D1 depends on what you consider in terms of para 189. We're quite clear from an officer point of view, there is an impact on the national landscape. We consider that steps have been taken to avoid and minimise, and that overall that the application proposal complies with 189. So therefore, from an officer point of view, we've moved on to the tilted balance, and we recognise that you would give significant harm to the impact on the visual landscape character of the area. We've recognised that. We also recognise significant harm in relation to the issue of identity coalescence between Cookfield and Anstey. That we've recognised as significant harms in terms of the planning balance. Obviously, in terms of the tilted balance, on the opposite side, it's tilted towards the presumption in favour of sustainable development. We've given substantial weight to the provision of a significant amount of housing, plus significant weight to various other matters which are outlined in the presentation, including the facilities in terms of the sports facilities, the local centre, the school, etc., all significant weight. So then it's up for the planning committee. We've exercised our judgment as a planning officer in the report in terms of where that balance, which is already tilted towards development, then sits when you add in the adverse impacts. For example, as I say, the impact on the landscape character, and we do not consider, in our view, in terms of our judgment, that those adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Ultimately, the planning committee are the decision maker. It's your planning judgment that is applied in terms of that balancing exercise. Ours is set out in the report. It's for you to decide whether, in terms of the weight that we've given to the various benefits, whether you agree with that, and whether then what weight you put on the adverse benefits. Ours are all set out, and I've explained, but ultimately it's for you to decide what weight you need to put on it.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
I've just got a few observations, really. Completely concur with Councillor Avery's point about the coalescence. The communities of Anstey and Cookfield will be virtually indistinguishable. They will just be one large conglomerate under this potential development. Speaking as an ex-teacher, I looked at the information about the SEN school, which clearly the County Council do not think this would be a good idea in that particular environment. I've also got concerns about the pace at which schools and school places could be delivered, given that this is nearly 1,500 houses. That's an enormous amount of children, even if you allow for some of those houses not having families. Enormous number of children. Where are they going to go? Because if schools are not deliverable or subject to problems, as West Sussex seem to be saying, I take, for example, the Brookley example, where they've had to pause on the development of schooling there. Where are those children going to go? I just think it would make primary schools in Cookfield, Anstey, Staplefield under severe stress, and probably add to the stress on surrounding secondary schools like Warden Park. So, to my mind, that's not sustainable. That's not good planning. I also, with Councillor Avery, the bus situation. I've lived in a small village and I know how dependent small villages become on buses. I don't believe that the amount of buses being proposed are anywhere near like to make it sustainable. So on those grounds, I think we cannot approve this.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Again, repeating the fourth meeting in a row where a pause in the district plan places us in a difficult situation. And without that pause of 6 months, if there'd been some very clear guidance, the largest, I think, speculative development the district's ever seen, and probably one of the largest sites outside the current proposed district's plan, would not have come forward. I think when I look at the report, in my mind, I do think it's a sustainable site. Why do I say that? Principally because it's on the A272 and it's on the road going to the M23. It's near. So I do think from an employment point of view, from a highways perspective, it is sustainable. I take on board the comments about buses, etc. But fundamentally, the houses being placed elsewhere in the district where highways are a greater issue, and they've been nodded through, even without any highways improvements. And officers and colleagues will know I'm not a great fan of decisions from West Sussex Highways, but on the evidence given here, I'd have to say, okay. I think for me, the issue is the definition around the landscape and the impact. That's what it comes down to. And the invoking that tilted balance, that's what it comes down to, really. It isn't in the district plan, the update, but where we are now, because of that, and I have to say, I think the 6 or 7 months was unacceptable, really, from the inspector, but where we are, this wouldn't have come forward, and I think such a large site should be considered. And we have to think that at the end of the day, being cynical and how the housing numbers are going up, we might well be asked to come up with new sites anyway. So I think the opportunism of the developer is not helpful, and the actual position of the government and the inspectorate by delaying this by 6 months is not helpful. But we are where we are. I have a question about, in terms of the numbers, the 1,450. Obviously, they're not going to be part of the 5-year land supply. My concern is, and I can understand people saying, well, that's not technically a planning issue, but I think it's an important question. If these 1,450 are approved today, how do they fit in with the plan going forward? And how will they link in with, if we are asked in the situation we are in the future, to come up with more sites to meet higher housing numbers? Because this is probably, I'll stand corrected, but this is probably one of the largest single sites in the district, I would say 1,450, except the sites that are in the current proposed update. So for me, it comes down to the tilted balance and the landscape. But the question is for me also, how will these numbers go forward? I mean, for this not to be part of a formal plan process, are they just going to be hoovered up and then the inspectorate wants another 4 or 5 sites for another 1,400 houses? So if you can address that question, it would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In approving this application, then this number, the 1,450, will go into our pot go towards meeting our housing need. So, for example, if the inspector asked us to for example, for another 1,450 houses, just as a nice round easy number, then the fact that we've approved that, we've already put them into our pot. So, you know, they're not going to be double going forward. They wouldn't be double counted because we've already, in the district, in terms of the draft district plan, established what our need is. That's set out there. This is all additional in terms of going into the pot. So you're not going to be in a position where they're not going to be counted going forward. If they're already in our pot, they will be counted, and therefore the inspector would adjust. If she had an overall figure in her mind, the fact that we've just potentially put this amount in, that will factor into that overall figure.
The reason why I ask is, at the moment, we've got both our arms and legs tied. We don't know what the process is going to be going forward, and where does the number stop? You know, we're in a very, I've used the word unenviable situation, but we are where we are. Thank you.
Councillor Eaves.
Yes, I'm looking at 189, and it does say development within the setting of an AONB should be sensitively located. And as Mr. Ashdown has said, that's really arguable. You put two lawyers onto that, they'll come up with different points of view. And it says somewhere in this report that the landscape is important, this landscape, at national and European level, because of its intimate agricultural character and tranquility and beauty. So that brings me to para 187, which says it's really important to protect and enhance valued landscapes and so on, and recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. So I would say that this isn't sensitively, going back to 189, this isn't sensitively located at all because of the lack of buses. Obviously, they won't run in the evening. The fact that the bus subsidy will stop after 2 years after the final applicant has moved in, it will be car dependent, I'm afraid. The whole thing will be car dependent. And if you've tried to get through Cookfield, it's all wiggly. You go under that tree and you have to wait for other people and so on. It's already a problem. Ardingly Reservoir, drought order, 27% full, not full at all, in fact. But South East Water don't have to comment, apparently. 128 trees lost. The Sen School, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. We're going to get land for a Sen School, but there won't be a Sen School because somebody's objected. There will be a possible GP surgery. We all know how that finishes, Kingsweald. It may not happen. We've got 15 flats there instead, not because of the developer's fault necessarily. There'll be a lot more traffic. And of course, there will be coalescence. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think in terms of the buses, the subsidy goes 2 years. It will then be up to the bus company whether it continues or not. And as you say, that is purely subjective to them. Yes, you want to?
Yeah, it's intended to provide a subsidy until the bus service is commercially viable. So within the applicant's figures, they indicated that the bus service would be commercially viable, I think with 4.9%, but bus modal share at the final occupation within the travel plan, they hope it will be before then, and some of the early figures that they provided me were with a higher bus modal share. So that was the worst case scenario once the development was fully built out. It was then asked for an extra 2 years on that just to further embed sustainable transport habits. At that point, the developer, 2 years post, felt that they wouldn't be providing a subsidy, it would be commercially viable, but that was tagged on just to ensure that it was and enable any measures through the travel plan or the trip monitoring strategy that's been agreed with the developer. So they'll monitor trip rates from the development in line with the new decide and provide approach where we don't go straight for highway mitigation all the time. And if they are over and above those trip strategies, there's a banded threshold of additional mitigation measures that they will implement. So it starts off if they're marginally above their figures, they do more travel planning. But if they're a bit more above, they implement improvements to the cycle route network or provide funding to West Sussex to investigate alternative schemes. So that would probably be towards the LC WIP schemes within Haywards Heath to support not only people from the development, people from adjoining routes who may use similar roads to people from the development to support sustainable transport.
Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Firstly, we ought to actually thank the planning team. This is a very comprehensive planning document. It took a lot of reading. It was really detailed, and I really appreciate the work and the time that's gone into that. Cuckfield was first recorded as a settlement, I think, in the 11th century. The church built in the 13th century. Anstey was first recorded in the 12th century and has links to the Knights Templar. The history is important because it recognises the separation of two communities, a lack of coalescence over 900 years, that this development is trying to trample all over. The site, as we know, does not sit within the emerging district plan. It conflicts with the majority, we heard the officer say, of the district plan policies, and it irrevocably harms the local landscape. It's not wanted locally, and it's not needed locally. There is no demand. We've seen the fall off of the build rates at Brookley and other areas. The houses are not being built because there is no market. There is no market because the economy is currently hard. So when we talk about this might not be started till the 1930s, it might not be finished till the 1940s. That's a long time for a scar, an irreversible scar on a beautiful landscape. The planning officer talks of tilted balance. Now, it's a view, it's a professional view and one that we should respect. But my view is that he is wrong. We seem to be playing a policy sort of hierarchy where policies that are moderately damaged, or there's moderate damage here, moderate damage there. I don't know how many of those add up to severe damage, because it appears that we're trying to compare apples and pears, and it just doesn't work in my mind. My view is that the change here is massive. It's considerable and it's harmful to the local landscape. The developer and landowner talk of a sustainable community. This site is not sustainable when measured against how people live. Councillor Avery talked about people going to the station, people working at Gatwick. Buses don't run at 5 o'clock in the morning when your shift starts at 6. They don't run at 11 o'clock at night when your shift finishes at 10. It really is a joke that we think that the bus companies will support this. They won't. This site will be full of cars. 1,400 houses, that could easily be 3,000 cars after a number of years when teenage children come along. That's a phenomenal number of extra cars, and it's harmful. The sites say the promoter will not live here. They will take their profits and run. They will not have to live with the consequences of their greed. This damages two individual communities, and it's in the wrong place. The site was not included in the district plan for good reason. These reasons have not changed, and therefore I currently cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The message is that, my colleagues, it's in the paper today, and basically this is an overdevelopment. Actually, I've known this site for over 60 years because it was part of their cross-country at school until they built the relief road, the bypass. I do like the idea of a garden development concept like Poundbury that's been promoted by the King, but here there's no vision, there's no design. We are not seeing anything of the design for this particular project, and we are being asked to approve it. The councils have provided a detailed report, whilst this is only an outline application. So they're treating it like a full submission, but too much conditioned on reserve matters is not a good way to proceed with a development. Instances of the school conflict with the being alongside the A272. So already we're talking about moving the site around. And it seems the case is with the houses on site 4 near the roundabout are in ancient wood. So once again, they have to juggle something around or lose something.
we should really note the CPRE report. And ironically, they came out with a report recently saying that 26,000 homes could be built in Sussex on brownfield. Well, Anstey is not brownfield. And CPRE also highlight the diversity and the visual impact of the site. As a cyclist, I would be supporting of a route into Haywards Heath, but I looked at it over many years and I haven't been given any details of how they would engineer that, but it's to be applauded that they're looking at it. And I live in Haywards Heath, and I share the town council's concerns, and not least the traffic build-up from Anstey along the A272 at Butler's Green. Every day you put the radio on and you'll inevitably find there's a congestion problem coming into Haywards Heath on that road. So that's just going to increase. And finally, this is not an allocated site in the district's housing plan, hence it's speculative and overdevelopment.
Thank you. Stephen, did you want to talk about the road mitigations? Or one of you, Steve or Stephen?
Yeah, I can say that the cycle route plans have been designed up and form part of the application, essentially going on the south side of the existing bypass before the provision of a new signalised crossing, and then it would follow the northern side of the road all the way down to the double roundabouts near here, and pick up the existing routes from Munster Green in. Yeah, is there any other?
Well, I did actually cycle there the other day. I mean, I don't need a cycle personally, but, you know, it's just coming into Haywards Heath. There is no scope, because, you know, you've got thousands of kids walking there every day to Haywards Heath on a very narrow road. So we're going to put cycle routes.
Yeah, so there would be widening into the verge. I think there is some highway realignment as well along there. And as to regard the other point on sort of coming in and traffic alerts, yes, there will be additional traffic generated by the development, some of which is heading towards Haywards Heath. There is the provision of the 3 bus services an hour, the cycle route, so there's the opportunity for people to undertake by sustainable means. For those who are driving, there are improvements to the Tyler's Green roundabout junction as well, proposed by the applicant to mitigate its impact on the junction.
Thank you for that.
Yes, I must admit I was surprised in the report how precise the timings for queuing is at some of the junctions when it comes down to the second. Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question, if I may, particularly for Mr. G. So first of all, thank you for your very comprehensive report within the Planning Officer's report. It's one of the most comprehensive ones I think I've seen in all of the highways committees that we've had. A particular question relates to the mini roundabout at the junction of the Bolney Road and the A272. I stood there for an hour on Tuesday morning, and to my reckoning, there are about 2,000 cars an hour that go over that roundabout in the 3 main directions. Maybe I've missed it in the report, but are there any planned upgrades, changes to that mini roundabout in size, in operation, in signalling, in anything? Because to me, that's one of the most dangerous junctions, certainly that I come across in the district, in its existing form, and clearly with the new potential development, that's going to significantly add to it. Thank you.
Yes, there are. It's essentially based on the scheme that was proposed within the local plan transport study mitigation. So widening on the A272 arm as you're travelling eastbound. There's also improvements on the northern arm to improve the crossing for pedestrians in the future, including a curbed island as well. Vehicle tracking, road safety audit and all things like that have been undertaken on the proposed design as well.
Can I just come back on that?
Yes, sir.
Is there any, yeah, and that's what I would call tinkering with the roundabout. Is there any scope for increasing the size of it, modifying the flows in and out? Because there are quite a few near misses when I was there for an hour. So, you know, there is some space there potentially.
No, these it's based on the plans that were put in the local plan transport study as well. So it's been tested in terms of capacity. As I say, it has been through the independent road safety audit process as well, to show that the scheme being proposed is safe.
Thank you. Councillor Sweatman.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at this application, to me there's one overarching factor, and that is the impact on this development on the landscape. Some of our consultees, even the tree officer, the conservation officer, and the landscape report quite rightly says, to my view, is that the consultant concludes that the development would result in an irreversible change. That's key to my opinion, to the part of the landscape that is considered important at both the national and European level for its intimate agricultural character, tranquility and beauty. And goes on to say significant adverse effects on the immediate site and its setting that the development will create in the perception of coalescence between Anstey and Cuckfield. I think as members we have to look at what weight we can attribute to these, what's in the report. And to me that is quite significant weight that should be attributed to this. If you look at paragraph 189 on the MPPF, which is the overarching document that we look at really, and the last paragraph is quite important to take into consideration. And while the development within their setting should be sensibly located and designed to avoid or minimise adverse impacts on the designated areas, there's also a question in terms of heritage assets as well. Our heritage consultant officer says in the level of less than substantial harm, it's quite unusual that she actually says there is a high level of less than substantial harm. And that worries me because as I visited the site, as I said before, you can actually visualise with the houses how that would impact on the overall character. And there's a number of listed buildings that she says would be a high level of less than substantial harm. So I've listened to all members, and I think I'm not happy with the officer's recommendations, and I've a view to refuse this application. And I'll leave it there, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Berggreen.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that we have a national housing need and we don't have a 5-year housing plan. But personally, I don't think that's a good enough reason for supporting this type of application that I feel is overdevelopment, unsustainable, in the wrong location. There are other more sustainable sites available. It would, in my view, be car dependent, and
and it's not allocated in the district plan, I don't think there's a need to repeat all the other good reasons that we heard today for rejecting this plan, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Do any other councillors wish to speak, or any councillors wish to add to what they've contributed already? Steve, would you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of points, or a few points. A couple of comments have been made, obviously, about the school provision and some of the other facilities as well. So, you know, just to be clear, in terms of the primary school on site, that will be direct delivered by the developer. That's in the developer's control and will be secured an appropriate trigger for its delivery secured for a Section 106 agreement. In terms of the SC&D school, yes, it is just land, and we've made that clear that is just land. We're not saying that a school would be delivered there. The county, as I understand it, are looking at various sites and choosing what is the best location. This gives them an opportunity to potentially put it on site. But what we're saying is the primary school will be delivered. The other facilities in terms of the things in the local centre, including the health hub, will be delivered by the developer, secured in the Section 106 with an appropriate trigger for that building to be built by them. So I know we've had situations, as Councillor Eve raised, in terms of the King's World. You know, this would be a different situation in terms of things will be direct delivered. There's an opportunity for a GP to go in there, but then there's other health services that could go in there as well. Again, the sports facility would be direct delivered by the developer by a certain trigger, and obviously, as we've noted in the report, some of these facilities that the council, as officers, would be interested in taking over the management once they have been constructed. So in terms of those facilities that are actually in the development, they will be delivered. There's not an either or, it's direct delivery. And that sort of leads on to the point, and I hear the comments that have been made in terms of whether the site is sustainable. You have those facilities being provided on site. You have the provision of additional bus services, car clubs, the increase in terms of the cycle route, etc. I hear your concerns, but ultimately, in terms of sustainability, a development of this scale is sustainable. At the very worst, is a neutral impact in terms of sustainability. And, you know, I just think that, you know, that something of this size and scale has the ability to make itself sustainable. And certainly, you know, I would compare that in terms of the three sustainable communities sites that we are promoting through the district plan are of a similar size and scale to this. And we are treating, in terms of the report and what we're looking to secure, which includes the community's development officer, which have been added to, you know, that's all about making this a sustainable community, and that's how we're looking at it. So I hear your concerns about other matters, but just on that issue of whether the site is sustainable, I throw that out there that, you know, it's not something that we agree with, and think at worst that it's a neutral impact. And then just going back to the point about the tilted balance, you know, it's not a mathematical exercise. It is a matter of judgment. You know, we've expressed our planning judgment. It's for you to express your judgment in terms of these issues. So it's not a tally. Are there more benefits than adverse impacts? It's a question of what weight, in terms of your judgment, you put on the various aspects, and then what way you think that arrives at in terms of that balancing exercise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker, do you want to?
Yes, thank you. I only asked a question before, so I'll come back on a substantive view, really. So, first of all, I'd like to thank all 8 speakers. Thank you very much. Very mixed, all very considered, all very powerful, emotional, and I always appreciate your input. So, thank you to those. I think I'd just like to give a bit of balance here, really, because you know, a lot of speakers have spoken in similar vein, and I think it's important that we get you know, both sides. This district council, we have a legal obligation to provide land on a rolling basis, as the planning officer said, for housing supply, housing land supply, and that obligation is a legal obligation that we have to do. And we've got an existing district plan, and we're currently still at examination for our reviewed district plan, which was an exhaustive process. And that, I call it in planning terms, the escalator never stops. It always keeps moving. That obligation is covered by the whole of the district, not certain parts of the district, but the whole, the north, the mid, west, east, and the south. Councillor Jackson has already said earlier on that in the south of the district, around the Hurstport, Pierpoint area, Albourne area, that they've got allocations of about 3,000 houses. In the north, East Grinstead's taken 1,000, 1,200 houses in recent allocations and in recent consents. In Copthorne and Turners Hill, there is an allocation there in the current district plan going through examination of 2,500 to 3,000. So it's not uncommon for this district council to allocate land or to consider options. My personal view is this site is very sustainable, despite what other members have said. There are huge infrastructure benefits here, and I think that, frankly, initially this site was seriously considered for allocation 5 or 6 years ago, and I think it was only on National Highways grounds that it was not taken to the final stage, which now all of those obligations have now been overcome. So personally, I think it's the master plan, and I think Mr. Oliver, who spoke, hit most of the positive points about it. When you look at the planned community, the benefits that it brings. So in overall terms, I support the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Right, if no one else wishes to speak, could I have a proposal from the floor, please?
Yeah.
Councillor Overy.
Just propose to vote,
What, to reject the officer's recommendation?
I think that's according to the members, isn't it?
Well, yeah, you're proposing that?
No.
You're not? Okay, right. Okay, so is there, if there is no, sorry, Councillor Eaves.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose rejection.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Burgreen. Thank you. Right. Right, before we adjourn, can we please have the details on the grounds on which you are proposing rejection? Sorry? No, we won't have a vote at this stage. We need to establish the grounds for rejection, which we will then adjourn to draw up in detail for those to be put to members so that they do know exactly what they are voting for. So if we can have the grounds and the level of weight that you consider should be allocated to the grounds for rejection, please. Councillor Eaves.
Reel off some numbers then, yeah? 189, NPPF to start with, 187, DP12, plus CNP5 and NPPF 8.
Right, one thing we do need is the level, whether it's significant, moderate or limited on each of those.
Well, that would take me a while to come up with that.
Because that's the detail that we do need to, so that if it, as it almost certainly would if it was rejected, go to appeal. Sorry. Okay.
Would you like Steve to
Yeah,
just pose
okay.
a question?
Thank you, Chairman. So I suppose that the first, obviously, you made reference to para 189, and clearly that, as we've discussed at length or been mentioned at length today, is important. So that's obviously in terms of the impact on the setting of the High Weald AONB. So can I take, or, you know, the question is, do you think the impact on the setting of the A and B is sufficiently harmful that it doesn't comply with 189, because then that has the implication that the tilted balance does not apply. So that's why it needs to be clear that if you think the level of harm is so significant that 189 is contravened, then that means the tilted balance isn't actually applied to the decision. So that just clarification on that would be helpful, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay, so we're looking at 187, DP 12.
DP.
Yes, certainly.
I would suggest DP 13 coalescence has got to be a main issue, and DP 16 the effects on the High Weald National Landscape.
Right.
And possibly DP 21 as well, because although the local roads have been dealt with, as Councillor Whittaker alluded to, the impact on the surrounding roundabouts and the general impact on Haywards Heath, Burgess Hill, and the surrounding villages, the increased traffic, I think, is a key issue as well.
Right. Okay, and I mean, obviously, there were in the officer's assessment, the impact on trees was considered to be limited. Are members happy with that? Yeah.
DP 6. DP 16.
Limited.
Yeah, we've got 16, yeah. DP 6 is limited, yeah.
Paragraph 11D.
Paragraph 11D.
11D1.
11D1, yeah.
DP 37. I think that's trees.
Right. Okay, so what I'm going to propose now is that the officers, Vice Chairman, myself and Councillor Eaves will retire to put forward a formal list that we can put to members. While we have adjourned, I would ask that members do not speak to members of the public, because I'd remind them the meeting is only suspended, the meeting hasn't finished. So it would be inappropriate for members to actually discuss this or any other issue with members of the public at this stage. Okay. to reject the officer's recommendation and therefore to reject the application. And I'd ask Steve Ashdown to explain the reasons which we propose putting forward and taking the vote on.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, from the debate and in terms of the motion put forward, there'll be two substantive reasons for refusal proposed. One relates to obviously major development in the countryside, impact on the rural landscape character, the extension built up area of Anstine and coalescence with Cookfield, and also including within that the loss of trees eroding the rural nature of the site. So reason one. And reason two relates to location and scale of development, unacceptable urbanising impact on the High Weald National Landscape. And as a result of that, obviously we consider para 198 is 89 is not complied with, tilted balance is not engaged, and therefore the application should be determined in accordance with the development plan. Hence those two reasons for refusal, Chairman. And sorry, there is a third reason that would go into that. That's the sort of standard one in relation to Section 106, affordable housing. So again, protect our position to ensure that we can secure the required agreement as part of any future appeal should it get that far. But that third reason would fall away in the event that Section 106 is agreed as part of any appeal process.
Yeah. And I propose that we leave it to the officers to handle the precise wording of that for to get all the legal implications correct. Right, so we have a proposal, we have a second. Do any members wish to discuss it any further? In that case, we will move to the vote, and are members absolutely clear on what they are voting on? That they're voting to reject the officer's recommendation and refuse the application on the grounds that the officer has explained. Has anyone got any questions on that before we actually go to the vote? No? Okay, thank you. Right, the vote is now closed. There's sorry. The vote is now closed. There are 8 votes in favour, 4 against. Therefore, the motion to reject the application and to reject the officer's recommendation is passed. We will have a 5-minute break now. For 1 or 2 people weren't able to have a comfort break because of what we were doing outside. So we'll have a 5-minute break before we go into the second item recommended for approval.
Thank you, Chairman. So, obviously, as set out, this is an application of change of use of farmland and woodland to a parkland reserve to include public access. So, in terms of the application site, outlined in red here, covers approximately 103 hectares, a mix of fields, woodland, and the existing sports pitches at Beach Farm Field here at the northern end. Sits to the east of Cookfield Village here. You have Whiteman's Green at the north, and then the A272 right in the southeastern corner. So the application seeks permission for a parkland site that consists of areas of public open space as well as large areas of ecologically restricted zones to support biodiversity net gain. So the areas at the top, at the northern end here, would be public accessible. The two larger areas here would be those ecologically restricted zones, and the green dotted line around here are the pathways which the applicant is proposing. So they will be able to walk around the ecological restricted zones but not have access in them. Physical works are very limited and consist of new walking routes, fencing, a potential viewing platform and hide. No vehicular access is proposed, and as it's not intended for the application to attract use from outside the immediate area of Cookfield or Anstey. The site contains areas of ancient woodland, particularly this area sitting down in here. And there is a public right-of-way, existing public right-of-way, which crosses through the middle of the site. There are a number of listed buildings in the vicinity of the site as well. You have Cookfield Park here to the east. There's a property here in the southwest corner here. There's a couple of properties up to the north as well. So these are just some examples of some of the physical works that are proposed in terms of nature of the fencing could be erected, as well as the viewing platform and the hide. You'll see the final details of these elements are intended to be secured by condition, and these are suggested as conditions 5, 6 and 7 in your report. Just a couple of slides containing some photos. So this is the northern end, looking towards the northern end of the site here. These two photos to the left and right. The one in the middle is taken close to the public right-of-way which goes through the site, and that's looking southwards. So this area in front would be one of those ecologically restricted areas. And these are photos of right there, the southern end of the site. And as you can see, all of these areas here would be within that ecologically restricted area. Quick aerial photo of the site. So the site contains these fields here, this woodland, as well as part of this woodland. So, get back there. So while this application will only come forward with the residential development determined as part of the previous application on the agenda, this application is a separate application and needs to be determined on its own merits. Much of the proposed land use relates to land management arrangements that could take place without the need of this application. Permission is, however, required for the proposed operational development. As set out in the report, officers are content that the application complies with the High Weald AONB management plan and the relevant development plan policies associated with development in AONBs. It's considered that the proposals would protect the setting of the identified listed buildings, meaning their significance is preserved. The proposal will conserve and enhance protected and priority species within and around the site and provide a B&G gain of approximately 18%, which will be secured through condition. It's not considered that the proposal will give rise to any significant harm to residential amenities of nearby residents. Matters relating to future management arrangements of the ecologically restricted areas are for the applicant. Officers have expressed an interest in taking transfer of the proposed public open spaces at the northern end of the site, as set out in the report, which would be secured through a Section 106 agreement, and the proposed recommendation reflects this. It's considered that the application complies with the development plan, and then there are no other material considerations that indicate decisions should be made otherwise than in accordance with it. The application is therefore recommended for approval, Chairman.
Thank you. But as I say, we do have our procedures, and I would ask people to respect those procedures when they're organising speeches in future. Right, the first speaker is Councillor Simon Stokes again, who'll perform from the back.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Councillor Phillips, for your indulgence. I and the three speakers who follow me want to tell you a true story, and one that you may not have read before. This application concerns a quiet area of farmland and woodland within Anstey and Staplefield Parish and inside the High Weald National Landscape. The change of use for which permission is being sought is to convert the area into a rewilding site modelled on the Knepp estate. Fairfax's vision statement for the site tells us that they will kill off the existing fallow deer population and introduce semi-wild longhorn cattle, non-locally native red deer and Tamworth pigs, which they will fence in behind 2 metre high deer-proof fencing on both sides of pedestrian access paths. Well, good luck with that. They also promise to manage the land specifically to make it a suitable habitat to encourage rare turtle doves, corn buntings and other declining bird species. Other habitat improvement works will be carried out to deliver this vision, as well as clearing ponds and improving ancient woodland within the site. It is intended that the introduced livestock will effectively self-manage the Parkland Reserve without the need for any more than minimal human intervention. Well, that's the change of use for which permission is being sought. However, it's not the change of use on which Fairfax has based its supporting ecological evidence, nor on which Place Services, your advisors, have addressed their input. The report, therefore, the report before you, perhaps, understandably makes no mention of Fairfax's vision either. This application involves a significant change in the existing use of the land, more so than the report acknowledges, and it's a change to which your expert advisor at the High Weald National Landscape Unit on the impact of the development on the High Weald and its management plan has strongly objected as being detrimental to its conservation on a number of significant grounds that need your understanding and analysis. As you know, NPPF Para 189 promises national landscapes the highest level of protection and requires you to give that requirement great weight in your planning assessment. It also bears on your new statutory duty to seek to further the purposes for which the High Weald was designated. I am sure you will have these requirements in mind as you assess this application. But I will leave you with this one thought. With its lavish promise and meagre delivery, doesn't it just remind you of the annual farce of the bogus Christmas winter wonderland consisting of a sad pile of soggy hay bales and dodgy lights marooned in a muddy field? I now pass on the baton to my colleague Giles King, Chair of the Cookfield Society.
Thank you. And that's before your 3 minutes starts, when you start speaking.
The applicant has submitted evidence that their proposals will offer amenity benefit and create a biodiversity gain, one sufficient to wipe out the biodiversity loss resulting from their main site development. But when you look at this evidence, you will find out a couple of things. The assessments of the BNG impact of the habitat changes they plan to the main and Parkland sites use different methodologies. This crucial Beachy Bottom site assessment has been based on an out-of-date version of the Parkland Management Plan and using an out-of-date metric. The main site assessment predates the Council's recent decision to proceed blind with no parameter plan against which to measure BNG implications. Secondly, the assessments look solely at the implications of habitat changes. Neither Fairfax nor Place Services have addressed at all the ecological or other implications of introducing new and different livestock into the site, nor of any changes in human movement patterns across the site. The overall biodiversity impact cannot possibly be assessed reliably without consideration of the effect on the landscape and its wildlife of large-scale animal imports into and human interventions within the site. This is a fundamental gap in the evidence base needed to justify the BNG gains claimed and the benefits or otherwise of Fairfax's applied for scheme. In short, the applicant's overall BNG conclusions are meaningless. Any amenity benefit from the reserve is negligible. Visitors will be enclosed behind high-strong fencing on both sides and made to use unmade-up paths that will be muddy in winter and much of which will be closed off from March to September. The hides and educational hut are no more than a fantasy. The proposed Safety First Toucan crossing to access the site and the hard coring of the main north-south access path have gone from the plan supposedly but unsuccessfully to remove harms to which the high-wheeled unit objects. Even your report accepts that the parkland will attract minimal interest. So much for the high-wheeled management plan objective of improving its access and increasing its attractiveness. Sir Charles Burrell, as we've heard, a nationally respected leader in rewilding and conservation, described the proposal as a half-baked smokescreen to enable the building of a new town. Over to Michael of the Sussex CPRE for more on this tale.
Again, 3 minutes starts when you start speaking.
Sorry, same old faces. We are concerned here that there has been absolutely no consideration of the deliverability of Fairfax's proposals for this land. If the applicant's vision for a NEP-style rewilding scheme, which is what this change of use application involves, cannot be delivered on the ground, then this application is a sham. Deliverability is fundamental. But no one has analysed for you whether the management plan for the reserve will work, or whether it can deliver the self-management outcome on which its whole edifice depends. You will find nothing about this in the evidence or the report before you. You are being asked to take it all on trust, because you cannot compel deliverability of an effective rewilding scheme by planning condition. The only advice that you have comes from the owner of the NEP estate, a world rewilding authority. He tells you in no uncertain terms that Fairfax's vision is not deliverable in practice. It cannot be made to work because the area is far too small. He also warns that the land is unsuitable for the bird species that the site is intended to attract, that red deer are liable to break through the fencing proposed, creating a safety hazard, and that the shooting of the existing fallow deer population is unnecessary. There is no Fairfax rebuttal of this evidence. You also have the high-wheeled advisor objecting strongly to this application as incompatible with the conservation and enhancement of the high-wheeled. That advice has to be given great weight in the planning balance. The report you have offers no justification for contradicting that advice. You should also look under the bonnet of the proposal for long-term management of the site and its financing. It is opaque and largely unaddressed in the report before you. If we understand the proposals correctly, they leave Fairfax in effective control of this public asset, whilst capping their financing commitment, after which all the cost would fall on who? You must consider this application just on its own merits. You surely cannot approve a change of use that has not been, and we say cannot be, shown to deliver the change applied for, one that your expert tells you would seriously harm the high weald, contrary to the national and district plan policy, one whose biodiversity implications have not been properly assessed, and one that exposes a public purse to future management funding risk.
Can you wrap up in a sentence, please?
Yes, you are being sold a pig in a poke. Tamworth pigs, as it happens. Don't buy.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Oversby Powell. And again, the 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. I can't claim to be an expert on rewilding or landscape management, so why don't we hear some more from an individual and a group who are. Sir Charles Burrell, mentioned previously, the esteemed conservationist and arguably the most authoritative figure on the subject of rewilding in the UK. When he read the proposed design and access statement, he wrote to this council, presumably somewhat aghast. He said, "It states the project has been inspired by the work that I have done here at NEP. I would like to make clear that neither Fairfax nor any of their advisors have consulted me at all. It's full of errors." Now, to be fair, inspired doesn't actually mean that Fairfax are under any obligation to consult his team, does it? But what he says next is somewhat more telling. He continues, "They state that here at NEP we have seen increases in numbers of birds such as corn bunting, grey partridge, starling and tree sparrow. This is absolutely untrue. These are farmland birds that do poorly under our rewilding regime, as they are birds that thrive under old-fashioned arable systems of farming." I'll come back to that in a minute. So maybe there was a bit of artistic license, shall we say, going on at Fairfax that day. Okay? But I should add that in the same letter, Sir Charles was, how could we put it, less than complimentary about Fairfax's plan for introducing and containing the deer, or their proposed management plan, or rather the lack of one, for dealing with the spread of injurious weeds such as ragwort, because they actually build a management plan into their own regime. Sir Charles wrote to this council again in December of last year, pointing out that the totally untrue comments he had previously highlighted had been used again by Fairfax, commenting further, and he must have been really wound up at this point, "I find the repeated use of stock photographs of grey partridges to be particularly deceitful." He went on to state that he supports rewilding experiments throughout Britain, but would be objecting to this proposal. I suppose then it's about who you, as councillors, really trust, the experts or a speculative developer. My last comment brings me back to those deer corn buntings and grey partridges that Fairfax seems so desperate to save. If they're really concerned about their welfare, perhaps then they should listen to the High Weald Joint Advisory Committee, who point out in their extensive objection that currently the High Weald is the best preserved example of a medieval landscape in Western Europe, consisting of small irregular fields bounded by hedges and woody shores for over 600 years. That is precisely the environment that those buntings and partridge need. And that's why this site is protected. So why not leave it for future generations to enjoy?
Can you wrap up in one sentence?
Thank you for listening to me.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
And again, for the benefit of anyone watching, Councillor Knight is not restricted for time. Although I gather he is.
I'll try to be fairly succinct, Chairman, thank you. The key reasons why I believe the BT Bottom application should be refused, this is based on the content of the officer's report and the main planning issues raised by consultees, parish councillors and objectors. I urge you to refuse this application for the following key reasons. One, the proposal fails the High Weald National Landscape Test. This site lies wholly within the High Weald area of outstanding natural beauty and the High Weald National Landscape. national and local policy, including paragraph 189 of the NPPF and policy DP16 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan, require that great weight is given to conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of this landscape. The High Weald National Landscape Unit has objected, stating this scheme is unsatisfactory response to the AONB management plan, particularly regarding woodland disturbance, rewilding proposals and deer fencing. These are not minor concerns. They go to the heart of the statutory purpose of the AONB. The proposal does not conserve or enhance the landscape and therefore fails the key policy test. 2, no genuine public benefit or local need. The application claims to provide new public access and recreational benefit. In reality, public access already exists via the rights of way network, and there is no evidence of unmet local need for further access. The proposal does not offer meaningful additional benefit to the community, and the supposed gains are overstated. The Parkland Reserve appears primarily designed to facilitate biodiversity net gain offsetting for the associated housing development, not to serve the local people. 3, harm to heritage assets. The Council's own conservation officers identified harm to several designated and non-designated heritage assets, including listing buildings and the Cookfield Conservation Area. Even if this harm is less than substantial, national policy requires clear and convincing justification and genuine public benefit to outweigh it. Here, the public benefit is questionable at best, and the harm, however modest, remains unjustified. 4, uncertain, unsound management arrangements. There is a lack of clarity and certainty about how the site will be managed and funded in the long term. The arrangements for future maintenance, especially for the ecological restricted areas, are not robust or transparent. This raises serious questions about the deliverability and the sustainability of the claimed biodiversity and recreational benefits. And 5, the application is inextricably linked to the major housing development. This applicant has made clear that this proposal will not proceed unless the associated housing application is also approved. This is not a standalone scheme. It is a device to enable major development on adjoining land and should be considered as such. Approving this application in isolation would set a dangerous precedent and undermine the integrity of the planning process. And in terms of policies, it's contrary to policies DP16, DP24, DP34, DP38 of the district plan, AS3 of the Einstein-Staplefield neighbourhood plan, and paragraphs 189 and 215 of the NPPF, and is directly addressed by the Goring Gap Monkhill versus Secretary of State for Housing legal precedent. In summary, the application fails to meet the high bar required for development in a national protected landscape, offers no genuine public benefit, causes harm to heritage assets, and is not supported by sound management arrangements. I urge you to please refuse this permission. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I would stress to members that we are looking at this as a separate application and not one that's attached to the application that we were considered previously. Steve, do you want to make any comments? And it'd be quite useful if you could reiterate to members what they can do without planning permission, even if this were rejected.
So, you know, in terms of the land use management, particularly where we're talking about the areas at the southern end which are termed ecologically restricted, you know, they can introduce anything on there in terms of cattle, etc. They can put that to wildflower meadow and B&G gains without requiring planning permission. So, you know, the main reason permission is required is because of the physical works to the site rather than the proposed land uses, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, open the discussion to members. Councillor Overy.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is a really strange one, actually. When I'm not sitting here, I'm a consummate walker, and I walk this twice a month or something, including the Anstey Farm site, which is, in my parlance, called the Full Cookfield. And so I know this area really well, and those photographs of the countryside and so on and so forth. So it's a really weird one because it exists in perfect harmony with nature as it stands at the moment, and particularly in the light of the previous decision, whether Fairfax will be minded to do any of these works is highly debatable. So it's a really strange application, which without the horse, it's kind of the cart without the horse, to be honest. So from the planning point of view, whether we, by voting for this, we secure anything, I'm not so sure, because I can't see anybody doing the work without the money generated from the other side. So I'm totally sort of ambivalent, and therefore, when in those circumstances, I tend to take the view of the experts. So Sir Charles Burrows knows an awful lot about this than I do, so that's where I'll rest it. Thank you.
I think we've got to ignore the other side. I mean, one assumes that will almost certainly go to appeal, and obviously if an officer, the planning officer, chose to overturn our decision, then the site would come forward. So we can't judge this site on whether that development comes forward or not. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Chairman. I know this area well. I live fairly close to it. I walk there. I fish in the ponds, and I've ridden over a lot of the area. Current access is good, but it is access to farmland. And for me, the damage to the high-wheeled landscape to create a zoo looking at some alien species doesn't feel the right thing to do. This isn't rewilding. It's not BNG. I've a bit of experience in BNG, and this is certainly not BNG. It just feels that it's a bit of a sop to the previous application, and I'm concerned that there hasn't been any local consultation and local views haven't been collected or considered. And at the moment, therefore, I don't feel I can fully support this. Thank you.
Councillor Bates.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I know the land quite well. I'm very confused by this, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been to NEP as well, and it's nothing like it at all. But, I mean, if you go to NEP, you get a cafe, you get parking, and then questions like accessibility, it's going to attract, I would have thought, people with disability there. And the classic one is the dog walkers. But there's parking, and I would have thought if this is the case with this particular proposal, people are going to go there for whatever reason, and they're going to need somewhere to park a car. And, you know, it doesn't show that at all. And, you know, how much access you can get onto the land in terms of the animals, I don't know. Or get round it, it just doesn't add up at all. So I'm not too sure why they actually ever brought the thing forward in the first place.
Do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I understand the confusion over the application in terms of, you know, obviously the previous application has been refused, but the previous application was not dependent. The acceptability of the previous application was not dependent on this application. This, you know, this is standalone. There's talk of, you know, rewilding, introducing of you know, particularly animal species, etc. You know, that is largely, I think, a little bit of a red herring, ultimately. I think if you boil it down to what's actually proposed and what is proposed to be secured in a planning permission, it's an area of public open space at the northern end, and the southern parts of the site will be subject to ecological enhancement. One could call that BNG, and you know, the conditions 2 and 3 relate to securing a biodiversity net gain plan, which will secure or will cover the management of that site for a 30-year period. And in terms of BNG, that generally doesn't necessarily sit well with either public access or things like cattle, for example. So in terms of the fact that those southern areas are restricted from public access, supports BNG, and the fact that there will be a plan that will cover what will be provided on there in terms of those ecological enhancements, that BNG, that will require to be managed in that form for a 30-year period. And that's really what we're talking about here. You know, this, while I appreciate what was submitted as part of the application when it first came in terms of, you know, this is the new NEP, that is not what's in front of you. You know, what it is essentially areas of BNG which they can do without planning permission and some public open space at the northern end. It is no more than no less than that, ultimately. You know, the fact that the previous application has been refused isn't relevant. The fact that they might not deliver this because the previous application has been refused, again, is not relevant in the planning decision that you need to make. And in making a planning decision, you have to look at our policies and think, in terms of the land uses where the majority of them don't actually need planning permission, what harm and what conflict is there with the district plan when most of these elements don't actually require consent in the first place? It's a difficult one, I grant you that, but I think you just have to really boil it down to actually what the nub of the proposal is.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chairman. As one of the speakers said, the money won't be there in perpetuity. It'll only be there for 30 years. So what happens if the trust then becomes insolvent? What happens if there are any uninsured events or natural disasters? Very difficult to say. The fencing will cost a lot of money, of course, so that's something that they probably won't do because they haven't got the housing estate to back it up. The whole place is too small for rewilding. The idea of putting red deer in and expecting them not to be able to leap over the fences, which are only going to be 1.45 metres, I don't see how that's going to work. Better to leave the fallow deer there. So there's a kind of ignorance about the rewilding idea. There's no mown strip the way there is at NEP, because otherwise you cause a nuisance to surrounding farmers. So I just don't get it, basically. And this is within the High Weald, so surely paragraph 189 kicks in.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak? Right, do you wish to say anything more before I ask for a proposer, Steve?
Not sure what much more I can, you know.
No, I don't think there is.
As I say, ultimately, it is what it is, and in terms of, you know, massive landscape change, you know, the growing of you know, a new sort of whether it's wildflower meadows or whatever in terms of the BNG can happen anyway, regardless of whether we grant consent or not. And I'm just struggling to see that there is a reason for refusal that we could evidence, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Sweatman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's a question of what these planning permissions, as Steve has intimated. I mean, reading reports, even the fencing, which is 2 metres high, does not require planning permission. So that's what it says in the report. I think it doesn't require planning permission. So I don't think we've got anywhere to go, really, on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Do I have a proposer and seconder for the officer's recommendation?
I'll propose it, Chair.
Right. I will second from the chair in that case. Right. Can we move to the vote, please? One more member to vote. Okay, the vote's closed. So that's 7 in favour of the recommendation, 1 against and 4 abstentions. Therefore, the vote in favour of the officer's recommendation is carried. Right, other matters I have none. Questions pursuant of Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice which was given. I have none. So I thank you very much, members of the public, for their patience and their attendance today. Thank you, members and officers. And I close the meeting at 4:57. 4:56, but yeah. Chris.